Hello everyone, welcome back to this series of 100 videos for 100 cantos of the Divine Comedy. Today we're going to talk about Canto 26 of Purgatorio, and I am looking forward to it. It's a really unique, important canto. It's maybe not as wonderful and gorgeous and unique as the next canto, which is going to be Canto 27. But it really has a few very peculiar elements that I would like to highlight. And by the way, here I'm generally suggesting, if you're viewing these videos, to read through the cantos by yourself first, and then maybe listen to my highlights or comments, because I don't want to make my videos as long as they would need to be if we had to stop on every single terce. And with this canto in particular, Canto 26, we are looking at a canto that is very readable, very straightforward, and understandable in its parts. So I want to try to highlight and shed light on a couple of things, but of course not the entire canto. We are, as an overview, we are again on the seventh terrace of Purgatorio, so the terrace of the lustful, and we will get out of or exit the terrace of the lustful in the next canto, in Canto 27. The narrative of the canto is really simple. First, the souls see Dante through the fire where they are burning, and they wonder about his physical body. Then Dante sees these two main groups of souls who compose the population of the seventh terrace. Very interesting point. And then in the second part of the canto, Dante understands that he is speaking with two very famous poets, Guido Guinizelli and Arnaud, who are connected in very important ways to his own poetic style and to his own poetic philosophy. So we could say that all of the Canto 26 is about human sexuality and the way Dante sees it, how much it aligns with the church view and how slightly maybe it differs from the normative view of human sexuality of his times. Something that is probably important to highlight is that in Purgatorio and within the church doctrine, lust in itself as a sin is a sin of excess of desire. All of these three last sins, gluttony, lust, they're all overindulgence in something that in itself is good. And this is kind of a corollary of the argument that sometimes gets lost, which is not only within the Divine Comedy's world, but also in the Catholic and Christian world. Desire in itself is not a bad thing, is a very good thing in itself. It's the overindulgence, is the excess that constitutes the sin. We still have Dante, Virgil, and Statius all going in a line because they have very little room to walk by, given that there is very little space between the fire and the edge of the precipice. And I just love really the beginning three tercets, because Dante is throwing a lot of light, space, and colors at our eyes. An extraordinary array of colors. He brings as if he was a director, he brings his camera first on the fire where he's close to, then up to all the west from azure to white, the immensity of the sky, so this azure, white, etc. And then the red of the flames that are colored in a different way depending on where his shade is covering them or not. Notice how on verse 15, the souls are said to never leave the boundaries of their burning. They never leave the boundaries of the burning, even if we could think and imagine they potentially could do that if they wanted to. It's just that they don't want to. So this is signifying the eagerness of these penitent souls to undergo their purgation, their purification. They want to burn in this fire, in line with all the laws that govern this Purgatorio world. On verse 18, we also have something else that's exceptional, really, because we have this voice coming out of the fire. There is a soul there that's addressing Dante. And the line used by this soul is, "Give me, who burn in thirst and fire, your answer." In Italian, he says, rispondi a me che in sete and fuoco ardo. So Dante took these words literally from a verse by Guido Guinizelli, who we find out is this soul, a poet, to echo them, but in a way that is exceptional, because this is the first and only example of contrapasso punishment in the Divine Comedy that is based on poetic lines. In other words, the original verse that Guido Guinizelli wrote was it was talking about pains of love and suffering for love, and in this original verse he wrote "che in pene io ardo," I am burning into these pains of love. So Dante took that verse and twisted it a little bit in a way that it's become a contrapasso in itself, the verse itself. Instead of "che in pene io ardo," "che in fuoco io ardo," in this purifying fire, I am burning, instead of in the pains of love. So not anymore a contrapasso that is between two facts or two behaviors, a behavior in the real life and a punishment or effect in the afterlife, but really a contrapasso between a verse in the real life and a verse in the Divine Comedy, in the afterlife. Guido then says, "I'm not alone in needing your response. For all these shades, thirst so for it, more than an Indian or Ethiopian thirsts for cool water." It's a little bit funny maybe, because it gives us a little insight on Dante's knowledge of geographies that were so far away from his world, like Ethiopia, India, that he used to mention them without really knowing what he was talking about. With this type of geographies, he meant, of course, places that were very hot and where people needed fresh water. What makes me smile a little is who knows exactly what he meant by India back in these times. And in any case, even if it was India that we know today, he certainly did not know about all the monsoons and the climate changes that happen there today. Certainly not a constantly hot place. Then we have this amazing moment of the two groups of souls meeting because they're walking in different directions and meeting at a certain point of the terrace inside the fire, and exchanging this moment of brotherly affection with this embrace. In fact, I noticed that the translations change a little bit, because what Mandelbaum translates this into is, I'm talking about verse 30 and 31, is there on all sides I can see every shade move quickly to embrace another shade, content, etc. This is giving us the impression that they hug lightly and then move away. But really, what Dante is saying in Italian is that they kiss each other. And this might, this is actually translated literally by Kirkpatrick. Robin Kirkpatrick, he says, it translates as, I saw on either side the shadows kiss, simply. And when Dante says ciascun ombra baciarsi, this baciarsi from bacio, that means kiss in Italian, that's what it means, they kiss each other. Somebody could think there is something erotic about it, but that's absolutely not the case. Here we are looking at a moment of almost unheard of meeting between heterosexual souls on one side and homosexual souls on the other, and having this brotherly affectionate gesture, which is a striking passage for two main reasons. One, the fact that there is this kiss of chastity, which is unerotic and it's unlingering, it doesn't really last, and it has nothing about it that is more than brotherly love. In fact, some commentators have gone back to St. Paul in his letter to the Corinthians and also to the letter of the Romans, where he used the expression, speaking to the Christian communities, St. Paul used the expression, greet one another with a holy kiss. So this holy kiss is the Christian kiss. It was actually in the ancient Christian communities a way to exchange a greeting. Instead of shaking your hand or hugging, there was a kiss. And it had nothing erotic about it. So that's already something pretty striking. The other point, and probably the most important one because it's even more unheard of and unique to Dante, is this presence of, we are led to believe, at least 50% of the population of the seventh terrace of homosexual souls. Souls who have been sinning against nature, with lust, with excessive desire, but not in a heterosexual. In fact, Dante uses this word, which is hermaphrodite, hermaphrodito in the ancient, but by hermaphrodite Dante meant heterosexual, and on the other side there are the homosexual souls, and some scholars also mention that even if we only hear about male souls, we should imagine that in this fire there are also some female souls on both sides. So number one, why is Dante having them kiss like that and then turn around? Probably to signify visually a strong contrast with the type of lasciviousness that they had as a behavior during their life. And that makes sense because there's always this sense of contrasting vice with virtue in Purgatorio. The second question I have is, why is Dante including homosexuals here? There is a lot of debate, I noticed, in the Dante scholar community about this, about in general Dante's opinion and view of sodomy and homosexuality. We've seen it in Inferno already. So what's different here exactly with what's different in the behavior of these souls to the ones who are in Inferno? Aside from probably the fact that in Inferno you never repent about your sins, okay. But it's not fully consistent and maybe is not 100% clear, because if you remember in Inferno, the Canto about the sodomy was not entirely forthcoming and clear about the definition of the sin of sodomy. The Dante scholar Teodolinda Barolini, in her great digital Dante comment to Canto 26 about this particular topic, she says, Dante reclassifies homosexuality in Canto 26 as he moves from hell, where it's a sin of violence against nature, in Inferno 15 and 16, to Purgatorio, where it's a form of lust and therefore of incontinence or overindulgence. In this way, homosexuality becomes a variant of human sexual behavior akin to heterosexuality, and that's where Dante is completely non-normative, completely different from his contemporary authors, poets, and writers. As a form of human sexuality, homosexuality can be excessive and hence require purgation. The implication, though, is that it can also be not excessive. And so here Dante appears tolerant and progressive from even a modern perspective, from our perspective. That's where Dante has part of his greatness. We've seen it with his handling of Jewish people, handling of and talking about female characters and the female person in general and homosexual. So it would be a mistake to look at him as a modern sensitivity, purely from a modern sensitivity standpoint, but he's not completely in his own time. He's higher than that. Like every giant, he's really walking on the peak of the mountains, above us. And isn't the ants simile a fantastic one? It's so perfect to compare these souls who just kiss each other quickly and then turn around and move away to little ants. I just love not only this particular simile, but the way Dante in Purgatorio in general compares souls and situations to souls in general to small animals who are small and innocent, to signify their modesty, the fact that they are repenting and modest. The two examples of vice that are being shouted by the souls are Sodom and Gomorrah, and that the bull may hurry towards her lust. Pasiphae hides in the cow. We already found Pasiphae in the Divine Comedy, and this terrible myth that basically generated and gave birth to the Minotaur in Crete. And then, just like cranes, of whom apart to flee the sun, fly north, Dante comes up with this a little convoluted simile of cranes, of two groups of cranes that migrate in opposite directions. And rightly so, this simile has been interpreted as a little improbable and maybe contrived, because generally just birds migrate in groups all towards the same direction and typically towards the sun. So there is no a group of cranes that, like Dante says, quelli del sole schife, cranes who don't like the sun, don't really exist. It was a way for Dante to show two groups of cranes who are fundamentally the same type of soul, who go in opposite directions. And so on one hand, the crane is a simile that he had already used in the Canto number 5 of Inferno, the Canto of Francesca, where the souls of the lustful were compared to flying cranes. And so there is a strong connection between Purgatorio 26 and Inferno 5. And on the other side, it's also a way for Dante to tell us, yes, I am being different and modern and non-normative, and including homosexual souls here, but I am still sticking to the normative way to intend, or Christian way to intend, heterosexual love as the correct or rightful or normative love, and the homosexual one as one that is against nature, because this being against nature is expressed visually by the cranes who don't like the sun. That is an interpretation that I think is fair and possible in looking at the reason why Dante included cranes who don't migrate towards the sun but against it, as a group of souls who are against nature or against God in the way they express their sin of lust. Something else I'd like to highlight here is at verse 58 and also verse 74, there are 2 points in this canto where Dante, almost casually, gives us a hint of his entire goal and mission in the Divine Comedy. He says, that I be blind no longer, I pass. I am doing this journey so that I can get away from my blindness, which is really beautiful. He paints salvation as a sort of understanding and starting to see again after being blind, which is a very evangelical and Christian way to see it. And also on verse 74, he says, blessed are you who would, in order to die better. This casual mention of in order to die better, so is just as great. And both these sentences, that I be blind no longer and in order to die better, practically apply to us as readers of the Divine Comedy. We are reading and absorbing as much as we can, understanding as much as we can of this fantastic, incredible poem, partially also in order that we can see our reality better around us. And if we're Christian, if we have faith, then in order to die better, to have a deeper faith, a deeper understanding of what it means to live as a Christian, but also to die as a Christian. Very interesting how on verse 76 and 77, we see a sort of definition of the sin of sodomy that Dante calls as the sin for which once, while in triumph, Caesar heard Queen called out against him. This was some type of legend that was written about in ancient times and transmitted until Dante's times, about Julius Caesar being in his parade after a great victory, and some people from the crowd, knowing something about his, of course it's all rumors and legends, but potentially having heard about his homosexual behavior with sometimes with either allied or enemy kings. They call him a queen. As I said, there are a lot of connections with textual connections, especially with Canto 5 of Inferno here. But with a big difference that there is no soul here who is, like Francesca, unrepentant or maybe blaming somebody else. Everybody is very conscious and responsible about their own sin. Here between verse 83 and 86, in the speech that Guido Guinizelli is giving to Dante, he actually uses the word beast at least 3 times. That's what Mandelbaum does in his translation as well, which is great. But the repetition of beast, seguendo come bestie l'appetito che si imbestiò nelle imbestiate schegge, really highlights the fact that there is this challenge and conflict between our human and beastly nature. Guido Guinizelli introduces himself to Dante with his name and last name. He was a Bologna-born poet, lived between 1230 and 1276. He was a judge, he was a Ghibelline, and therefore as a Ghibelline he was exiled in 1274. He wrote a lot of poems in vernacular, and he is the official founder of the dolce stile nuovo, or the sweet new style that we've already seen and encountered in Canto 25. And that Dante is recognized by somebody as the main, or even sometimes the founder, but he, trying to be humble, says, no, I am just one of those who write in the dolce stile nuovo. Dante's admiration for Guido is probably higher than for any other poet that we've seen so far, aside from Virgil, because we can see in this Terrace at verse 100, and without hearing, speaking, pensive, I walked on, still gazing at him. There is this pause in the action of the narrative, which really expresses all his awe, the awe that Dante is having at being in the presence of Guido Guinizelli, still gazing at him a long time, and prevented by the fire from drawing closer. The second poet that Dante meets here in this canto is Arnaud. He lived across 1200, so he was a little older than Guido Guinizelli. He wrote in a very hard style that was called Trobar Cluse, which was in Occitan language, kind of fell into Provençal. To make a sweeping generalization, we could say French today. And he is also here as a poet who wrote about courtly love like Guido Guinizelli, not because Dante wants to make any specific point about poetry and style here, but he wants to make the point about his view of love and the evolution that personally Dante had in better understanding how the meaning of love and how his past and young interpretation of love was mistaken. So in this way, both Guido and Arnaud are sinful, not because of any specific behavior they had in their life. In fact, we have no historic proof or demonstration that either one of these men had any reason to be on the terrace of the lustful because of behaviors, but because of their poetry, because of the way they wrote about love. And this is a concept that was so important for Dante because he was guilty, in his own opinion, of exactly the same sin, of exactly making the same mistake. The final 3 tercets are extraordinary because they're all in Provençal, and we could be tempted to think that Dante here is trying to imitate the style of Arnaud Daniel as a poet. But according to the experts and the scholars, he's actually not doing that here. He's writing in a style that is not as hard as the Trobar clues that Arnaud used in his poetry. This style that Dante is using here is much more plain and simple, according to many, almost as another type of contrappasso in verses. Again, just like the one that Guido found himself in a few verses above. Here we have a simple, plain Provençal that is modified slightly by Dante to show the fact that the way that Arnaud was writing originally had something that needed to be corrected. Very interesting, and it would take a long time to get into the significance of every single line here and what exactly Dante is doing from a poetic point of view, but extraordinary skills of Dante to be able to play around in this way between languages. These are my thoughts and comments about Canto 26. I have to confess I'm really excited because at this point I'm looking forward to the next canto. I'm gonna have a treat. At least it's a treat for me, and I hope it's gonna be for everyone else. Dan Christian, a friend of ours who's been on the channel already before, he's been teaching Dante for all of his life. He's a coach, a teacher. He's going to present and comment Canto 27 together with me, and I can't wait because I love Canto 27 with all my heart. It's a canto that sings to me in a special way, where every terce deserves a special award, and so I really look forward to it. Thank you for watching this video, and see you next with Dan.